Hello and thank you for joining me today at Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura and today I am going to be tier ranking the 56 books that I have read so far this year. I was going to do that mid-year freak out book tag, but I just didn't feel like it. And lately I haven't really felt like doing monthly wrap-ups either, but I did want to go look at the last 6 months because like I said, I've read 56 books, which is pretty good for me. It's more than I had expected to read so far. So yeah, I thought I would go through and tier rank them, which I've never done a tier ranking video, but they are very popular. So I hope you guys enjoy this. And for some reason, the categories I have them be kind of dating related, where the books at the bottom are forgettable, then we have Not My Type, then I Had a Good Time, Obsessed, and Together Forever is the top tier, which I feel like should be green and the red should be the bottom, but this is the way it is, so we're just going with it. So yeah, these books are in no particular order, just beginning with The Pale Blue Eye. So this is probably I Had a Good Time, because I don't think it's like obsessed level, but I definitely enjoyed it. I mean, it was like borderline obsessed level, but ultimately I'm gonna put this one in I Had a Good Time. One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This one was surprising. I went into it with kind of low expectations, I guess, even though Taylor Jenkins Reid is such a popular author. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one more than I thought I would. And I'm going to put that on obsessed level because yeah, I loved the romance in that, and it has like friends to lovers and a love triangle and just a lot of drama, and it was also very relatable in certain ways, and I love the characters, and yeah, I really liked that one. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This one overall I really did like a lot. There were certain aspects of it that, I mean, I had a few critiques, which I talk about in the video for it, where I share off my Suntup Press book. But overall, I'm tempted to put it in Obsessed, but I think I'm going to put it in Had a Good Time. Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead. I think this is the third book in the series. I should probably look that up because whether it's the third book or the second book definitely does make a difference. Okay, so Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead is the second book in the series. And this one was the most frustrating because in all of the books, Finlay is getting in these situations, like getting herself in situations she shouldn't be involved in. And she's like, well, I can't go to the cops. And it's like, yeah, you can. Well, why are you putting this on yourself to figure this out? Like, you are totally out of your element. Like, go to the professionals, go to the cops. But she feels like she has to take it on herself. And it was just more annoying in the second book. So I'm going to put this in Not My Type. Cormac McCarthy, No Country for Old Men. I went into this feeling a bit wary because I wasn't a huge fan of The Road, at least not as much as other people love The Road. But I was very pleasantly surprised and happy with how much I loved this one. And I'm putting that in Together Forever because I loved that book. It gives you so much to think about. I love the characters, the writing style, just an amazing book. Ella Enchanted. This one, I had a good time. I'm almost tempted to put it in Not My Type because it is definitely for children, not even young adult, but I feel like this is meant for like children. So I'm going to put it in Not My Type because I liked it, but it didn't really, I don't know. There's been kids' books that have like struck me more, and that one just wasn't one of them. Losing the Signal. This is the story of Blackberry. And while I did find this interesting and I'm glad I read it and I was able to compare it with the true story, ultimately this one like really is not my type because the subject matter is something that I just can find a bit dense at times. Nonetheless, I'm still glad I read the book and it was interesting. It's just definitely not my preferred genre and topic. And then Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. This one is I had a good time. I enjoyed it. I think this is one where this is a book aimed for like 12-year-olds, for example. Like I feel like Ella Enchanted could work for people even younger. But yeah, Are You There, God? Is also one that's aimed towards kids that I just enjoyed more and I got more out of that one than I did Ella Enchanted. Stronger by Jeff Bowman. This is about the guy, a Boston Marathon bomber survivor who lost both of his legs. And he is not even a writer. I mean, someone helped him write this book, but I was still impressed with how much I liked this book. And it was also very readable. And I just read it within like 2 days because I just couldn't put it down. And he's just so open and vulnerable and honest. And I was just really surprised how much I liked this book. Tony and Susan by Austin Wright. This one is such a confusing one. And there's still things about it I don't understand, but I'm going to put it in Obsessed because again, this one gives you so much to think about, and there's so much symbolism, and like, it seems like there's so many like hidden meanings that I still don't understand. And I still find myself thinking about it, as well as the movie Nocturnal Animals. That was really good too. Yeah, putting that in Obsessed. And then Shadow Over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft. This one I'm putting in obsessed because I definitely like the Lovecraftian type of writing, which obviously this is my first time reading Lovecraft. I've read other books that people described as Lovecraftian, but I had never actually read Lovecraft before until reading that one. And yeah, I definitely liked it. It was definitely that vibe that I enjoyed. And I definitely want to read more of H.P. Lovecraft. Paris, a memoir, the Paris Hilton memoir. This one I was very pleasantly surprised by. I'm almost tempted. I'll put it in obsessed. Because that one is, again, it's one that definitely gives you a lot to think about. And again, she's just so open and honest and vulnerable and real. And I feel like she just has a lot of great insight and perspective. And it really made me like reflect on myself as well. So that's why I'm tempted to put it in the top tier. But I guess I'll keep it in obsessed. I'm trying to think of what my critiques were as to why I didn't give it 5 stars, but I absolutely loved it though and would highly, highly recommend it. And I have a whole video talking about it. Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey. If you watched my channel at all last year, in the second half of the year, you will know how much I love this book. And I read it for the second time this year, and I'm happy to say it was just as good the second time. Together Forever, that book is so good, so amazing. I have a book versus movie video for it, plus I have my book review video for it. Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants is a series of 4 books, and I kind of put them all in together because they are very similar. There's certain books I prefer over others, but for the most part, they kind of are all just in the same vein. And I think they're better than just I had a good time. So I'm going to put those in obsessed as well because I loved reading those books so much. They were kind of reminiscent of Anne of Green Gables. Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun is the 3rd book in the Finlay series, and I liked this one better than Finlay Donovan Knocks Them Dead. So I'm going to put this in I Had a Good Time. This one, I liked it better because they switch up the setting. Instead of her just being at home, she's at this like police academy training weekend or something. And so just that alone, just having it be somewhere different was a nice change, and it made me like it better than the second one. And Finlay was just a bit less annoying, I guess. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I read this one twice, back to back, Together Forever. This book is amazing, so incredible. And it's also such a quick read too, because it's relatively short. I was scared to read this book because I thought it was going to be this heavy, depressing book, but it wasn't. It covers some heavy topics, but ultimately there's like so much hope and positivity, and it's just a fantastic book. And it's a great, like, it's not a coming of age story because Celie is an adult, but just seeing her character and what she goes through throughout the course of all these years, as well as her sister and Albert, I think his name is, and just the relationships between the characters plus their own individual journeys they go on. Highly, highly recommend. It was so, so good. Fantastic. So far, it's the best book I've read in 2023. Finlay Donovan is Killing It is the 1st book in the series. This one, I had a good time. I was hoping I would like it more than I did, but yeah, like it was fine. It's a fun read, and I like the premise. The premise is really funny, but it just didn't click with me as much as I had hoped it would. The Fisherman by John Langan. This one was so good. Again, this is one of those that was like Lovecraftian before I knew what Lovecraftian really was. But yeah, it gets into like the weird sci-fi kind of horror writing, similar to, you know, like Jeff Vandermeer kind of. But trying to decide, is this obsessed or Together Forever? Also, I heard someone say that the writing reminded them of Stephen King, which at the time I wasn't thinking that, but afterwards when I heard them say that, I was like, oh yeah, I can see that. I think I gave it 4 stars, which means I should put it in the obsessed column, but I'm gonna get crazy and I'm gonna say Together Forever because it really was so good. And I read it so quickly, I could not put it down, and it has some really creepy moments and it's just so well written. So highly recommend. The Perfect Find by Tia Williams. This was a recent read. This one, I had a good time. I thought it was well written and she does a good job. You know, it's a romance between a 40-year-old woman and like a 21-year-old guy. And so it does a good job at showing why they're both attracted to each other in the first place. Because in some ways you're like, why does a 40-year-old even want to be with a 20-year-old? Like, what do they even have in common, right? But it does a good job showing that, but it also does a good job of showing the issues that come up with an age gap relationship, you know? And then Stephen King and The Shawshank Redemption. I mean, I think because this one has so much hype, it makes me maybe not like it as much as I otherwise would, because I liked it a lot, but it's not like a life-changing book for me or something. So even putting it in obsessed seems kind of high, to be honest. I'm really tempted to just put it in I had a good time. Because yeah, it wasn't one of those books that like really struck me, you know? So I'm saying had a good time. And then we have Stephen King, The Mist. This one, I'm gonna put it in, man, this is tough. I feel like Not My Type is a bit too low, but I like definitely didn't like love it. And as far as King books goes, this is definitely like towards the bottom as far as like, you know, my ranking of them. And then the movie, I think I said the movie won when I did the video, partly because of that ending, whereas the book ending is more ambiguous. That's a tough one. I'm just gonna stick it in Not My Type for now. Maybe at the end of this video I'll change my mind. But then we have Julia Armfield, Our Wives Under the Sea. This one is obsessed. Again, this goes along with The Fisherman and H.P. Lovecraft because it's that weird sci-fi story, but it's also a story similar to Annihilation about this relationship. And one of them in particular is looking back on her relationship as the relationship is changing. And so it's not just like this sci-fi story, it's also just a really personal story. And I thought it was so well written and I absolutely loved it. There's some things about it that I'm kind of like not sure on. And that's why I'm saying it's not in Together Forever, because I think I need to give it a second read. And maybe after a second read, I would bump it up higher, but for now it's an obsessed. Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This one, originally, I would have put it in Not My Type, but then they talked about this on the Ink to Film podcast, and when they talked about the book, it gave me a better appreciation for it. So ultimately, after hearing other people's thoughts and analysis of it, I'm bumping it up to I Had a Good Time. Finding Me by Viola Davis. This is the memoir, of course, by the actress Viola Davis. This one has, again, has had so much hype and everybody says how it's like the best celebrity memoir ever. I don't know what celebrity memoir I've read that I would say is the best ever, but I definitely liked this one a lot. I think it would go in the obsessed column though, more so than Together Forever. I mean, there was a lot about it that has stuck with me and that after I read it, I wanted to tell someone about whatever I had just read. And you know what? I'm putting it in Together Forever because it was really well written and again, great perspective and insight and so honest and open and vulnerable. And she relates it to the hero's journey, which is, a very common thing in like film and books is to write books using this outline of the hero's journey. So to do that for a memoir is very unique, I think. And while maybe the reason why I was hesitant to put it in Together Forever is because it's not like there's not a lot from her story that I personally could relate to. So maybe I'm tempted to put ones higher that like really hit me personally. And so while hers didn't, I still really loved it and I would highly, highly recommend it. And then Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant by Ann Tyler. I really liked this one. It is a family saga. I guess it's a saga. It takes place over the course of like 20 years maybe. And this mom and her children, and as they are children and as they grow up. And it is really well written. It's kind of similar to Joyce Carol Oates, who I love. So this one, Obsessed, seems pretty high, but then Had a Good Time seems so low, too low. So, oh man, I guess I'll put it in Obsessed, even though again, that seems too high. But I do love books like this. I'm a sucker for books about families and their complicated family relationships and the drama, and we get perspectives from each of them. And so it is really well written. And if you're a fan of Joyce Carol Oates, then I highly recommend it. And then the Sundown Motel. This one I liked. Putting it in the forgettable column seems way too low, but it is one of those books that I could see myself, like I remember it well enough right now, but I know in the long run, it's going to end up being kind of forgettable and I'll be like, wait, what happened in that? Because there just wasn't much to it that stood out. And it's not that it was bad and I didn't have a problem with it, but I'm just going to put it in Not My Type because forgettable just seems too harsh. And I'm tempted to just put it in I Had a Good Time, but looking at the other books and I Had a Good Time, I feel like maybe that would be too high. Yeah, I'll keep it in Not My Type. Even though it's funny because some of these books are my type, I just didn't like them as much as I thought I would. Anyway, Salt Slow is another book by Julia Armfield. It is a series of short stories that all kind of have that same vibe as Our Wives Under the Sea. And yeah, I loved this one. I'm going to put Obsessed. She is like my new favorite author for this year and I can't wait to read more of her books. She only has the 2 so far, so I'm excited for her to write more. Velvet Was the Night by Silvio Moreno Garcia. This is another one similar to the Sundown Motel where it's just very forgettable, but putting it on the bottom of the list seems too harsh. Honestly, I'm just going to put it there though, because there was like nothing that stood out about this book. I mean, the writing isn't bad. Like she's a good writer, but just the story itself, already I'm like trying to remember the details of it. And it was just kind of forgettable. And then The Sisterhood Everlasting. This is the 5th book in the Sisterhood series. And I included this one in its own thing because it was written a while afterwards, maybe like 5 years, maybe it might've been less. It may have only been like 3 years afterwards, but it feels different and separate from the original Sisterhood series. And this one takes place when they're all 29. And I liked this one. I didn't like it as much as the original 4, for sure. But I'm gonna put it in I had a good time because I did like it. Although I'm tempted to say not my type because certain things about it were just a bit too cheesy. But honestly, I'm gonna put it in not my type. I wanted to give it a higher rating simply because I like the series, but that book on its own just isn't good enough, I don't think, to put in I had a good time. And then Everything I Never Told You. This one I went into with high expectations, I think, and I just didn't like it as much as I thought I would. So I'm gonna put it in I had a good time, which seems like a weird name because this one is such a serious book that deals with some very serious topics. But I liked it, but I definitely wasn't obsessed with it. Drive by James Salas. This one was a very pleasant surprise. I am putting this in obsessed because I really, really liked this book. I had to read it twice because it was a little confusing, but it's a short read and I didn't mind having to read it twice. And overall, yeah, I just really enjoyed that book. Just the whole vibe and atmosphere of it, I really loved. Jaws by Peter Benchley was another pleasant surprise. This one I'm putting in obsessed. I had heard this one had some problematic aspects to it, and it does. But honestly, it didn't ruin the book for me by any means. Whereas The Godfather, I didn't even finish that book. But this one, yeah, I really loved it. Definitely would recommend it. Spoiler alert, the hero dies. Together Forever. I loved this book. I read it in January, and it was such a great mix of the comedy and the tragedy, and so poignant and heartwarming, while also just being just really funny too. So highly recommend. Driven, that is the sequel. This one, honestly, I'm gonna put it in forgettable, which forgettable, this doesn't mean it's a 1-star rating. It just means that it was forgettable, right? So maybe I might have given this 3 stars for both of these because the writing isn't bad and there was nothing offensive or horrible or bothersome. It was just a forgettable story. Even now I'm trying to think of what happens in that one and I'm having a hard time remembering. So to me, that one was a bit forgettable. East of Eden by John Steinbeck. Together Forever, that one is so good. Absolutely love that one. That one and Grapes of Wrath I really like a lot. It's hard to say which I prefer, but yeah, Together Forever. I Am Legend. This one was a pleasant surprise in large part because the ending was so good, so obsessed that, yeah. So, and I had low expectations kind of going into that one as well. So what I expect going into a book definitely affects my opinion of it in the long run, but yeah, really loved that one. LA Confidential, this one, in some ways, I'm so proud of that video I did where I go over the plot because the plot was so confusing. And so it is well written, but there's certain aspects of it that I would be hesitant to recommend it to just anybody. And I myself would never read it again. I already read it 1.5 times and that was enough. But I'm gonna put it in had a good time because it is really, really well written, really well constructed. And there was a lot to admire about this plot. There were just certain details where it's did he have to include that? Just take out a few of those things and I would have liked it better. But some parts of it were just a bit too gross for me. And then Of Mice and Men, I'm doing this one. I can't decide if this should be obsessed or Together Forever. I'm also kind of partial to John Steinbeck, but I do love all of the books I've read of his so far, and Of Mice and Men is definitely the heaviest and the saddest of them, but it is so well written, so well done. Yeah, that one's Together Forever. It's fantastic. Terry McMillan, How Stella Got Her Groove Back. This one is very similar to The Perfect Find. Obviously, Stella came 20 years before, but this one, to be honest, I'm tempted to put it in forgettable because the story is just so surface level and there's just not much substance to it at all. So I'm putting that in forgettable. Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty. This one is Together Forever. I absolutely love, love, love this book so, so much. This was my 3rd time reading it. The last time I read it was in 2019, so it had been a while, but so good, so fantastic. The characters are amazing. Moriarty writes characters who just feel so real and they feel like someone you know, and I feel so close to them. And then I can also see myself in each of them to some extent too. And also the reveal, the story itself is so good and you want to keep reading to figure out what is happening. And even though I knew the reveal, I still wanted to keep reading. And yeah, so, so good. Absolutely fantastic. Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This one, not my type, literally, because, well, maybe not literally, because I enjoy romances, but I'm almost tempted to put this in forgettable, actually, because there was just nothing about that one that has stuck with me. And I read it in April, so I remember parts of it still, but I think in the long run, it's going to be one of those where I'm oh yeah, I read that, but what happens? Because there just wasn't anything about it that stuck with me. Peter Pan, Together Forever. I was surprised how much I loved this one. It was so whimsical whimsical and fun and cute and sweet and had some good messages in it, and I absolutely loved it. Confess Fletch, this is the second book in the Fletch series. I have not read the first one actually, but very forgettable. I just felt like the writing was poor for one, but then the plot and just everything about it, it just wasn't doing anything for me, and yeah, ultimately it's forgettable. Grady Hendrix, How to Sell a Haunted House, this one, obsessed. I really liked this one. I listened to the audiobook and it's so good, and I talked about this in my wrap up, but similar to Stephen King, this might be like a scary story, but it's so much more than that, because we go into these two characters, this brother and sister, and their family history, and this family trauma that is kind of being passed down from one generation to the next, and how that is affecting them in their current lives. And this woman has a daughter, and so how that is now going to affect her daughter as well. So even though it's creepy, there's like so much more to it than just that. So absolutely loved it. I read Southern Book Club's Guide to Vampire Slaying last year, and I liked this one better. And then we have French Braid, which is another Ann Tyler book. This one I'm going to put in Had a Good Time because I did like it a lot. And again, it's like about a family and all of their perspectives, but there wasn't as much to the plot as I thought there would be. Like there's nothing, like with Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant, there's like more specific events that are driving the story, whereas French Braid is just kind of about this family and what happens through the course of the decades without there's no like big moment that affects the rest of this family, And so maybe I kept waiting for there to be a moment that changes this family that this story is focused around, but it's not. It's just they're just living their lives and different things happen, but nothing is like this huge touchstone moment, Anyway, I liked it though. Revolutionary Road, I think I gave this 4 stars, but honestly I'm gonna put it in Together Forever because I love this book, I love this movie. Just a great look at this marriage and this couple and who they are as individuals plus who they are as a couple, and the drama going on within their relationship. And man, it sucked me in, at least. And I was just so invested in the story and I felt there. And then the movie is incredible, such a fantastic adaptation. And then for Edgar Rice Burroughs, this one it looks like this is The Warlord of Mars, which this one I'm going to say I had a good time. The Mars series, for the most part, I mean, we'll be getting into them, but next up is The Gods of Mars. And this one, I'm going to say not my type because it started out my type and I was really liking it, but then it kind of took a turn and there's also some cheesiness to it. I'm tempted to put it in I had a good time though, but I'll stick it in not my type because it just wasn't quite for me. And then Elton John, Me. I'm tempted to put this in Together Forever, but I'll keep it in Obsessed because I absolutely love this memoir. So good. It was ghostwritten, but still fantastic. Again, it's a mix of comedy, he's very funny, mixed with some very serious topics in his life, all the issues he had from his childhood and his adulthood and his addictions. I'm putting it in Together Forever because just thinking about this, I absolutely loved this memoir so much. The Last Housewife, not my type. This one, she talks about some triggering topics, but I feel like Big Little Lies does too, but Big Little Lies I think does it in a very tasteful, respectful, realistic way, whereas this one just did it in a way that I didn't like, and it almost felt like she was trying to trigger people with this book, which maybe that's not fair to say, but it just felt, I don't know, it just wasn't for me. And then A Princess of Mars, I actually like this one quite a bit. I'm going to put it in I had a good time, and I liked this one better than the other 2 books in the series. And even though I'm not a fantasy person, I do like sci-fi, just not fantasy. And these books are kind of a mix of both. But yeah, I was surprised at how much I liked the first book, A Princess of Mars. Then A Head Full of Ghosts, also by Paul Tremblay. I'm going to put this in I had a good time. This one would kind of fit for not my type because the topic is something that's a bit creepier than I usually read, but I did think it was really well done, and the ending is one that makes you think, and it's definitely not your standard kind of story. And so yeah, I really liked it, but again, it's one I would be hesitant to recommend to just anybody because it was pretty scary at times. And then last of all, we have The Talented Mr Ripley. I was tempted to put that in forgettable, but that seems too harsh, so maybe I'll put it in not my type. But it honestly was kind of forgettable though. The movie is so much better. The book just was kind of bland. So this might seem harsh, but I'm putting it in forgettable. There we go. And that's it. That is the ranking of these. Let me zoom out here so you can see it better. Okay, so there we go. There is my tier ranking. I could go within each of these and rank them more specifically, but that seems like too much work right now. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know how many books you have read so far this year and what some of the best ones are, and then what some of the forgettable ones are. And thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.